comment. We're limited. We're about to start with public comment for the October meeting of the Douglas County Food Policy Council. Just starting over for the recording. There are 3 minutes per public participant, so I'll ask at the beginning that you introduce yourself if you're giving a comment.
Thank you.
And then we'll do a timer for 3 minutes, and I'll count you down when there's 1 minute. I'll give you a little nod or a heads up or a hand wave, and we'll stay on time, ideally. Is there anyone who'd like to get started? Doc? Okay, like I said, please introduce yourself, and then please tell us why you're here and what you're interested in.
Okay, the reason for me coming this evening was I was concerned about Savion asking the council for a letter of recommendation. And I didn't know if that was actually appropriate for them to ask you guys for that. I don't personally believe that any of their plans for using the facility that they're going to put in will ever be used efficiently or effectively for grazing or harvesting of grass or feed. And I have a feeling that, and it's just my opinion, that I believe they're probably going to put language in the contract that they will not adhere to over time, and that the land will eventually stay a solar farm and will become not useful at all for farm ground. And the contracts that are being negotiated for 40 years, not 25 years. I don't think that's appropriate, but nevertheless, by the time they say that they're going to be done with that, the ground is going to be worthless for farm ground, whereas right now it's type 1, the best farm ground in the valley, and I don't see as that's appropriate use for farm ground to be using it for a solar field. That's about where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give us your name one more time for the record?
Lawrence Little.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make comment at this time? The public?
Are you still going to Nancy? Are you still planning to have Savion make a presentation?
Connie, do we know if we're going to go ahead and
I'm not
they are
sure.
here?
My interpretation that they are going to request for permit next month. So I think depending if they're on that agenda or not, because I think it just depends on if it falls within our timeline. I think Tyler.
That's here.
Yes.
Connie, I think they're here.
Yeah.
They're here.
Could you introduce yourself real quick?
Sure, I'm Ashton Martin with Savion.
I just want to make sure that
You understood?
primarily
Yeah.
their presentation, okay.
Yeah.
Point of clarification, is the presentation on the agenda?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so why are we questioning whether or not they're presenting or not?
Tyler had mentioned that it's not a presentation necessarily, that you don't have enough time to present.
I
What is
was
it?
I'm sorry.
Please.
I was under the understanding that there is going to be a motion to take a vote on a special meeting next month.
Yeah.
I'm happy to present this evening, but I recognize that it may warrant more discussion.
Yes. I think we don't have enough members to make a vote to move forward, which is unusual for a membership, but.
Connie's right. We currently don't have enough members to vote for the letter of approval in this meeting. Give an idea how long the presentation is, if you were to present any information at all, or talking points.
I can make it as short as maybe 10 minutes. I could talk for much longer about it. I think whatever really fits with the agenda and the desire.
And for your patience, everyone, we're flying by the seat of our pants a little.
I'll just chime in really quick too. So the decision to make a motion, I was going to make a motion to have a special meeting because this is a topic that can't be discussed in 20 minutes. We've had meetings last week and today that led me to feel like we need to make as an informed decision as possible. And so I was going to ask that we have consider a special meeting that would have Savion present plus additional stakeholders in the community so that we can make the best well-informed decision as possible. As most of you know, we were brought into this process, into the solar regulation process a couple of years ago, invited by the Planning Commission to speak out and up about our concerns. And so we were instrumental in part of the framework for the regulations. So I do feel it aligns with our work, where the Planning Commission would not have asked us to join that effort. But I want to also make sure that we have our membership as informed as possible, can ask questions, have discussion. And so that was the original intent. Ashton, thank you for joining this evening. And if you can give those who are at least in the room a short presentation, that would be great. I'm sorry that we weren't able to make quorum to make either vote, but we are going to work with what we have.
Okay,
According to the agenda, the presentation says presentation. There's a lot of 20 minutes. Is it
That
reasonable
was
that
weird. It was not intended to be a presentation because the presentation alone would take 20 minutes. We would not have been able to have a discussion.
Did anyone read the?
Being presentation.
That was just miscommunication by either me or whatnot, but I apologize.
He sent out a whole bunch of information about their plan, where they're doing it, and all that other stuff, though.
Yeah.
Did anybody else read that? I did, but
Thank you, Ashley.
I feel like a lot of that, I think that would cover a lot of it, but that's my opinion.
And that was the intent, was to do that pre-work in lieu of.
If one were reading the agenda, would one anticipate that there would be a 20-minute presentation?
Yes, I think if we were to have quorum, Tyler had requested to change that item to be moved to a special meeting to have more space and for discussion. But
so we don't spend too much time on this.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is tentatively offer that if we can have a 15-minute quick higher level, like just give us an overview when we get to this point on the agenda. And then if there's time at the end, we'll make room for questions if you're able to stay around. But at the moment, I don't want to spend too much time. There are other things that we also still need to make our way through. And so because there is a little bit of room on the agenda, we will do what with it what we can. And
Thank you, Cody.
Yeah, of course. So for the moment, we're going to move on to start discussing the Douglas County Indigenous Food System Plan, the study, and the action plan.
yes, so this part is mostly for FPC members and anybody that's in the audience or in attendance can join as well. We are in the pre-planning process of the Douglas County Indigenous Food System Study and Action Plan. I'm gonna move to the table actually. Yes. Okay. So the Douglas County Policy Council applied for a land grant last year, and we have still not received news whether we have gotten the funding for this project. The goal of this food system study and action plan is to support the entrepreneurship in food systems for Indigenous people of Douglas County. We have a fantastic food system plan that is led by many food policy councils in the state and also across the U.S. and its territories. as a guiding point to move food policy forward. And we have a very, very unique indigenous population in our county that needs and deserves. So the Food Policy Council, in joint with the Sustainability Office, applied for a USDA land grant to conduct this study that will provide critical data from the indigenous Native American folks in our region, and focusing on food system entrepreneurs like farmers, chefs, retailers, any like pop-up Indian tacos, figure out what does the indigenous food system look like and how can Douglas County support this system to thrive. So
How much was the grant?
we applied for, I believe, 54, but this was my first grant, and after consulting with Eileen Bourne, she said I requested to.
Did you voted for 54,000?
Yes, but it should have been in the 70s at least. I was told. So we have, we're in communications with Multi-Perspective Health and Research Consulting LLC. And this is, they have done work with the FPC before to form the ethnic refill study in 2019, which was a partnership with the multicultural grocery stores across Lawrence. And today, what we're going to do with Food Health FPC membership is to go over on how you would like to start preparing for this work. So we are expecting to reapply for a land grant or also potentially obtain funding from ASCO USDA office with Mackie Moore. So the funding for all of this is tentative, but we can still move forward on the prep work on this. And I had sent out a questionnaire for FPC members that has the following questions. How can Douglas County support local indigenous communities? We have a few anonymous responses, and a part of that is there is alignment with the food system plan in several areas, including Goal 1, Goal 4, and more. Douglas County could help educate the entire community so that indigenous folks don't have to do it all for labor. These are verbatim. They could also provide the funding and support needed to support indigenous people's businesses and community efforts to provide culturally conscious care, also for service providers. So thinking about what can the council do to learn more about the indigenous food system, to prep them to support the consulting firm that we hope to hire once we have funds. And some items that FPC members have requested are potentially having presentations from indigenous leaders in the food system, learning about indigenous food sovereignty, learning about traditional indigenous farming practices, of course, learning about the challenges and barriers to access capital and resources needed to develop and sustain food production and food businesses for indigenous people. Current food system workforce, figuring out how that looks like, what are the opportunities, the challenges, the barriers. Other comments were how can the FPC expect to assist experts? So to answer that question, so these are comments by FPC membership. So the role of the Food Policy Council in partnership with the higher experts, so both Indigenous Community Center will be hired and also Multi-Perspective Health Research and Consulting LLC to conduct this study and action plan. And the role of the Food Policy Council is to support their work as leaders and with their personal expertise in the field across the food sector.
Can you go back to that, saying you said there was 2 contractors on that grant, it was Lawrence Indian Community Center?
The Indigenous Community Center, ICC, and Multi-Effective Health Research and Consulting LLC.
And what is Lawrence Indian Community Center? What is that? What are they gonna do?
Yeah, so the Indigenous Community Center they have several farmers at Indigenous Community Garden and Farm in North Lawrence. Welcome. And part of one of their members is our board member, Crystal Rajak, who's not present right now. But they will help guide on how Indigenous farming could be better supported. And also in the past, they have done events to support Indigenous entrepreneurship, not necessarily just in the food system, but having pop-ups across the city to showcase Indigenous entrepreneurs. So I think in that way, they already have some connections that will be really, really helpful. And of course, we still don't have a stakeholder map, and that's where communications and community support will come into shaping who all is involved in this work in collaboration. So right now, just to reiterate, we're in the pre-planning process. So we're planning the plan. Yes. Are there any questions from membership?
Connie, I've asked you this question already, but it might be worth it to ask in this context. What is the relationship between the Indigenous Community Plan, the Indigenous Food Systems Plan, and the food system plan we already have in place?
Yes, so the current food system plan shares about the food system as a whole. It does mention to support, it does have the word equity, and this does mention to support Indigenous communities, but it doesn't say how. And to better support the entrepreneurship ecosystem, in particular the Indigenous community, we need to know what it looks like. So that's where the experts come in to show us how it looks like. Is that actually?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Connie, if I understand, our food system plan was actually endorsed by the county commission, if not the city commission.
It's the city and county.
Jointly. So is the intention that this new plan would also be endorsed by the city and county jointly, city and county commissions jointly?
That would be great. I'm not sure on how that would work, and I know Sam, you're on the call. I know that Jill had mentioned that the city has worked on particularly supporting Indigenous entrepreneurship. I was not part of that work. But Sam, feel welcome to hop in and share if you have anything. The city of Lawrence, definitely.
Yeah, so what was I think I'm still hearing a little echo. What was the question?
Can I repeat it?
Yes, please. Wait, I can also repeat it. So the question was, is the Indigenous Food System Plan also going to seek joint approval from the city commission and the county commission?
Sam Camp, Economic Development Analyst for the City of Lawrence. I'm not as familiar how often any recommendations that the Food Policy Council has. I don't know. I mean, I would assume if it's like any other advisory board, you guys make a recommendation and ultimately it gets implemented by the city commission. So they would need to, if there's some kind of policy that comes out of it, they would need to approve it. Otherwise, it may just get brought as you've made a recommendation and they receive it. Whether it gets made into policy or not, I think is entirely up to them.
Was there an effort to support Indigenous entrepreneurship? I have a vague memory that Joe mentioned something like that, but I'm not sure.
I know in the past, the city has tried to implement, kind of like like a working group strategy with one of them being indigenous entrepreneurship. I know in the past, we've tried to work with, Freddie Gipp, to kind of kickstart some of that. As far as I know, that hasn't really gone anywhere, it hasn't really advanced, maybe as far as the county has some of their efforts. But I know as we're looking for things like the BIPOC revolving loan fund, and some of these other maybe more hands-off approaches, that's how we're sort of supporting it for now.
Thank you, Sam. So just for a recap, from the notes that I have gathered from FPC members, it looks like we're going to be spending, the next 6 months or so prepping, doing pre-planning, for the FPC to learn more about the topics, and gather, figure out the stakeholder map, and have some workshops and maybe panels or speakers to learn more about the local indigenous food system before jumping into the study.
I guess one of the things I want to add is some of the perspective I get from this, from doing the Johns Hopkins Community of Learning practice, is one of the reasons it will be important to participate and help shape this indigenous food system plan is for all the reasons that our food system plan is general for the county has been very instructive in our work. Part of it is also now identifying policy barriers to indigenous foodways. And a lot of those are probably going to be ways that current policies don't center indigenous culture. How do you access food? What foods are you trying to access? A lot of these things have already been said, but it needs to be reiterated that these things are important, and it's important that we get these from indigenous community members about like, hey, I need to be able to hunt, or if I hunt, I need to be able to sell it because this is how I do things. And so looking at ways to figure out how we can help policy step out of the way, I think it'd be helpful.
I have a question if we're gonna support this. Do we have any indigenous people on the council? We just appointed, somebody was just appointed, weren't they?
Mackie Moore and Crystal Bradshaw are.
Okay. Sorry, I haven't been here in a couple months. I just wanted to make sure, because I was like, well, makes no sense for us to do this if nobody has that perspective. So.
One of the things that's happening in the past month is quite tremendous, but I'm the dean of the school business here at Haskell, but I'm also the project director for the USDA extension grant that we've had for a long time here at Haskell. And this month, though, we also were awarded a SBA grant to create a small business development center here on our campus. So that will be rolling out within this next month from the SBA. There's some shaky things going on because of the whole government shutdown, blah, blah, blah stuff. But we're supposed to have a kickoff meeting with the SBA in the next couple of weeks. We also are today I got the final draft of a SAM agreement where the SBA Region 7 out of Kansas City, I believe it is, they're going to have somebody that offices here on our campus as well. And so those again are going to, and that the target is indigenous communities, of course, here on our campus, but our small business development center service areas for all of Northeast Kansas, including the 4 tribes here in the state of Kansas. When I wrote it, that's the way I wrote it, because that's what our extension does. And so I see those two bridging together. And so then we had a meeting with NAP, which is a Native American Agricultural Fund that was created by a couple of class action lawsuits. And, it's a national organization, and their CEO is actually an alumni of Haskell. And so, they wants to us to help us to create an indigenous, an agribusiness degree here, but also do work like this, food sustainability, food sovereignty. So a lot of those things are gonna be things that we start looking at, how we do this stuff to help our citizens, in the business arena, you know, take that as, Indian taco vendors and, you know, that show up here at our events, but how do we get them out into other events, whether that's licensing, finances, food handlers, you know, all those different things is what we're gonna be looking at and creating a curriculum that helps. Within a 5-year plan of our small business development center, there will be 2 incubator spaces that we identified from the needs of our communities. And that's, commercial kitchen and food training, space, and then also, a space for artists, whether that's beading, painting, or whatever. They can come in and then they can start to learn how to take their stuff to market, whether that's e-commerce or a gallery or a co-op or something. And so these are large multi-year grants. I just got back at 4 o'clock today from Denver from our NIFA USDA extension meeting. And there's a lot of great things that we got going on with that. And where you guys are talking about bringing speakers in from an indigenous background, not a problem. I can get them. We have some very knowledgeable people, and I met some more this week. So please, but you know, I think this is needed. But first reason why. So, but if you don't do it, we're probably gonna do it.
And Ashley, to get to one of your points, even it's worth pointing out that if we wait for, there's so many ways to put this. If we wait for people with marginalized identities to be given power before we actually do things to help them, then it's never going to happen. So part of what we're doing is finding partnerships so that we can make sure.
I am not at all opposed to it in any way. I don't know what they are. So I was like, if we don't have people on the council who can bring that perspective, we're not going to be helpful. So does that make sense?
It does, which is why we need.
Not at all opposed to this. Like, this sounds like a good idea. I don't know what they need or how we could help or anything. So as long as we have people that are partnering or part of it that are doing it, like that know those problems that we can address, that makes sense. So that was all I was asking.
Cool.
This is strict with time.
How much attention can we give to the legislative statement right now without, I think we're still short 1.
Kim, could you give us some support with critical reading, just to make sure that we're letting our speakers.
Where do you go?
Connie, were you asking me a question?
Yeah, could you help me understand about how we can, like, Trevor is here to present, but you had mentioned on the chat that we don't need quorum to set up a special meeting.
So Kansas Open Meetings Act does allow a group to decide when to meet without a quorum, because you have to decide to get together to do public business. So if you decide to do a public meeting, you can schedule that. It then just has to be posted publicly, or sorry, a special meeting, and then just has to be shared with the public so others can join the conversation. But you can decide to hold a meeting without a quorum. It's like a chicken or the egg kind of situation.
Okay.
Does that help? Does that help?
Yes. I think before we move to the next item, I just want to make sure we're using our percentage time wisely. And Tyler, you're still here. Tyler, would it be best to request for a special meeting?
He's here.
Yes.
You have people to listen to him. Why not just do it? And if we want to have a special meeting, then we can get more people. I would do that.
We
But
can
I
do
mean,
both.
if you're gonna respect people's time, if people show up.
Yeah. Tyler, did you have an idea? So let's take a quick moment. Tyler, did you have an idea when we might do a special meeting, so we can at least announce it? Because in case for new additions or people who didn't catch it, there will not be a vote at this meeting to approve or to not approve a letter of recommendation for the Savion policy right now, because we do not have enough voting members. So currently the idea is we'll have a short introduction to the project, and maybe at the end there'll be time for questions, but I can't promise that. We've already passed through the public comment period. What I can say is we are now interested in setting aside a special meeting, one, so that we can vote, and two, for interested parties to continue to be engaged with the process. So I just want to make sure we're all on board at the same stage right now about the Savion agenda item. Tyler, was there an idea when a special meeting might be set up?
Yes, we were looking at Monday, November 6th, so 2 weeks from today, from 6:30 to 8.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I know this is a bit of an odd meeting.
Okay, I would like to repeat that it sounds like we are going to set up an additional special meeting Monday, November 6th at 6:30 to 8. And that ideally will be when the Douglas County Food Policy Council chooses to vote or not to vote for the letter of recommendation. We're going to set aside time for some presentation on the project today, but there will probably not be a lot of time for public comment or questions at this time. If there is, we would love to be able to facilitate, but I cannot promise that that will happen. Okay.
Hey, question about that?
Sure, and we'll find out.
This sounds really stupid. Do you have to be present at the meeting to vote? Because I know that I can't make that. We have 4-H that night, but I would be happy to send my thoughts and comments in a letter to the council, but I wouldn't actually be there to vote unless I could pass along what I know it's going to be.
I'm sure you have to be here to vote.
Okay, but I could send you my comments.
Yeah, and we can call you in.
Yeah, we can. I'm pretty sure we can call you in for it.
Okay.
Would that be an option, Ashley?
It depends on when you vote, and it might. Our 4-H club is in Vinland, and there's like never cell service there, so I may or may not be able to answer.
Tyler, there was a question about where this meeting would be.
No. When the vote would be.
Oh,
I
sorry.
will be in Vinland. Yeah, I will be in Vinland with no service. I may or may not be able to call in, so.
It sounds like it's going to be.
So meeting location to be determined. I would guess we'll do it at the county office if it's available.
If necessary, if possible, Connie, I can also make a sheet for any other people interested here, and we can update them if necessary. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, so we are going to move on to the next agenda item. We're going to talk briefly about the legislative statement, or do you want to move right on to?
Yes, we do have Douglas County lobbyists present.
Excellent.
They're going to support us through sharing on how, what the process is, and as particularly what is appropriate for the FPC to advocate on right now, being that the Farm Bill has been extended and the advocacy time is running. It's at a different timeline than it was last year. So could you give us a brief update on what this means to new membership? Also, there's some folks that are new to this work, and yes. Stuart?
I'm sorry, was that a question for me?
Oh, yes.
Um,
Can you hear me okay?
yeah, I think I could make some, yeah, I think I understood what you were asking. I didn't know that question was for me. Other than working with a couple of groups of folks that are harvesters and some other people that are following along in the federal legislation, that's all still on hold and up in the air. Obviously, I don't know what the timeline is. I think they're dealing with a bunch of other issues right now, like who's in charge. So I'll have to get past that.
And do you have, could you give us a review of what this document is and how does it impact the county for new membership to learn about?
And could you also introduce yourself really quick?
Yeah, and tell me what I didn't tell me what document you want me to talk about as well.
Sorry, yes, we're looking at the Douglas County 2023 legislative statement to be
Okay.
able to provide recommendations for the 2024 legislative statement.
Right, okay.
Particularly.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So my name's Stuart Little. I have a government relations advocacy firm here in Topeka. We represent a variety of groups around the state. We represent local governments, including Douglas County and public education, lots of folks in the healthcare field, primarily areas doing drug and alcohol treatment, addiction services, those kind of things. And then other group of some business clients. So we, among, I think the overlap why Jill may have suggested we join in is we, in addition to representing Douglas County, we also do some work for the Kansas Food and Farm Coalition, which is made up of KC Healthy Kids, Harvesters, Rural Center, and they all work closely with Eileen Horn on food policy council issues and those kind of things. So that's part of the work that we do. And then we also do a little bit of work for Climate Action KC out of the metro area. So we're in a universe in Topeka where there's hardly any conversation about climate and sustainability and those kinds of things. We're doing the best we can to keep an eye on things. So so that's the work we do. I am responsible to and carry out what the county commissioners through the county administrator wants us to do. So I don't necessarily have, I'm not going to go wildly off the path here, but I will talk about the issues that were in last year's policy agenda. I don't know if you all have a copy of it. I think I have the last version of it. So obviously on pages 4 and 5, or on my pages 4 and 5, the environment and sustainability. And I think several of these were new, in particular last year. Obviously the build and the Inflation Reduction Act brought a lot of attention, and local governments are working through that process, figuring out what to do there. The references to the regenerative agriculture. And let me just say, do you want me? I'll just highlights, I think, of what I can say about each of these. The build process the state's process has gone through. Because most larger local governments are working directly with the federal government. The state's main function has been to have to set up a fund for smaller jurisdictions, smaller cities and counties that may have projects that they want to go after those dollars for, and they provide the matching funds. And so and I'm not sure how much that's being maximized yet. So there's opportunity for that. So that's part of what the state's role has been there, other than just kind of a lot of this whole process has just been information sharing with people to have some in local governments about how to access and use those federal dollars. So natural resources, the regenerative agriculture and conservation practices. Every last couple of years, we've had bills introduced. I don't need to tell you all the environment that's in Topeka and kind of how these things get received sometimes, but Representative Hsu from Johnson County had done a carbon agriculture bill a couple times and it did not get any hearings. The renewables and the idea for a state plan, there's a lot of conversation about having a state energy plan, and there's not a majority will in the legislature to do that, but there's lots of conversation taking place. Within that same section there has the PACE program, and it is there has been, sorry, I got a cat in my way, move. There's a bill that was introduced in the 2023 legislative session for a PACE program like it's used in Missouri and other states. And so that bill did not get a hearing. The Nature Conservancy, their government relations person, introduced that bill. Hey, get down here. Ugh. They introduced that bill and did not get a hearing, but that's sitting out there. Let's see, climate crisis. I think we have some issues with the legislature, and I'm not speaking for myself. I'm trying to make sure that just to convey how some of these conversations can get picked up sometimes, but aren't getting a lot of attention in many ways. The oil and gas industry, other than the legislature passing a resolution to emphasize energy independence, which of course means domestically captured energy, was kind of a discussion of oil and gas that we had. The KIA program, the Energy Efficiency Investment Act, that was a package of programs that actually the KCC approved some of those programs for Evergy to implement some of those efficiency programs. I think the last section in this part on food programs and systems, the Farm to School Cottage Foods Statewide Food Policy Council, I can say that the work we do with the Food and Farm Coalition are in the process of getting prepared for the 2024 session, but we'll be talking about farm to school and trying to expand that. We had a hearing, the Lawrence School District was there to talk about their program and had great legislative interest. So we're going to be continuing to have conversations about that. One of the issues that we have spent time on is trying to figure out the best structure and organization wise way to handle a statewide food policy council, and don't have I think we've got another meeting scheduled here in a week or so where we may come around to some conclusion, but there was some time and energy spent looking on the policy council in Colorado as in some ways a model to think about. So from me working for the commission and for the administrator, that's kind of my assessment from the Topeka perspective on where these issues kind of are in or the components of them are in the legislature. I'm happy to answer questions if you would like for me to.
Membership, are there any questions immediately? Membership in the room, membership in the chat.
I was just going to share, there will likely be some of this discussion at the Kansas Food Action Network annual convening, which is happening later on this month. So if you'd like to be part of that process, I would suggest registering for that event if you haven't already. I think it's the last full week of the month on a Tuesday and Wednesday. Connie, if you can throw that registration in the link if you have time, or maybe after the meeting.
Tyler, could you comment on how the Food Action Network serves as a substitute for a statewide Food Farm and Policy Council?
So I know that if I'm understanding your question, it wouldn't be a substitute. The Kansas Food Action Network is kind of pushed based on feedback they've received from, I think, their membership and others, that it would be beneficial for the state to have its own overarching food policy council. And so that was added as a priority, I believe, for maybe the last couple of years. I know they've been working towards that for a while.
Thank you.
And this is Stuart. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Stuart.
So I was just going to note that Food Action Network is part of the Food and Farm Coalition, and so they're clearly, obviously, with the other groups leading the conversation about where to go with that. And I think the idea was having a food policy council as a freestanding entity from KFAN or any of those, that would be that it would be able to focus primarily on those issues and have some broader kind of shared sense of control over it. I think it's my kind of interpretation of the conversation has gone.
Yeah, and I would add too that as far as I know, Kansas Food Action Network is still operating under KC Healthy Kids and
Yes.
is not a state sanctioned organization. It's an offshoot from a nonprofit organization.
Yep.
I think it might be beneficial if we're gonna have a special meeting to add a vote for this item then.
Yes, again, because we don't have a voting quorum this evening, it is likely that we will include on the November 6th special meeting an opportunity for the Food Policy Council to vote on recommendations. So please, Food Policy Council members, if you have any time in the intervening time to meet with your working groups or to gather together with your working groups in email, please have them reconsider these legislative statements and what recommendations you have. Umut did have a question in the chat about language regarding SNAP and WIC. Umut, is there anything specifically you had? What do you want that language to do?
Well, my thinking on that is since those SNAP and WIC programs are heavily tied to the Farm Bill, and granted the Farm Bill has an extension, is there any point to, because there's all sorts of slashes going on at the state and federal level, left and right, is there any sort of supportive language that would be beneficial to include on a county level to send out to Topeka, or is that going to also fall on deaf ears?
I don't think it falls on deaf ears at the county level at all. And I know that there are part of what's being discussed in the Food and Farm Coalition is a couple of attempts to address some of the issues that are kind of the aftermath of the HOPE Act, which was passed a number of years ago, where they constricted access to SNAP benefits and put work requirements on, and just basically made it harder for folks to access those. Been kicking around some ideas about increasing the threshold for seniors to have access to benefits, and making a couple of other changes that haven't been finalized by the group. But I think if there's some desire to make some comment about, positive changes in SNAP to make it easier for populations to access the services, that if you're interested in, that would probably line up with some of the proposed legislation that's going to come from the coalition during the 2024 legislative session, trying to address some of those issues. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, does anyone have any, I can take one more question for Stuart, otherwise we will move on to the next agenda item.
I have a question that may or may not be for Stuart. So if you want somebody else to go, that's okay.
That sounds threatening.
Okay.
Okay.
It's just to clarify that I understand what we're doing. So we are going to make recommendations on this statement. And then our recommendations will go to our county commissioners. And if they approve them, then this is like their recommendations will go to Topeka for legislation and then maybe on. Is that accurate? Is that the process we're doing?
Well, for us, we will have meetings and communicate with members of the Douglas County delegation and make sure that they know what's going on, what the county commission has asked for.
So you lobby on behalf of Douglas County?
Yes.
Is that
yes.
okay? So
Yep.
so these recommendations go to our recommendations go to the county commissioners. They approve it. It goes to you, and you lobby on behalf of Douglas County for these things that we want.
And the things that we don't want, we're going to be trying to not happen. And then if there are things on here, if it's like something SNAP related, something like that, and the bills do get introduced, that's something where we'll reach back out to the county and say, this is on your platform. You guys have expressed an interest in this. If you all want to engage and have some testimony or try to get a hearing and those kind of things, that's how we would work through those kind of things.
So no, I get I'm a Farm Bureau member and we talk about advocacy a lot. So I just wanted to make sure the process was similar. So thank you.
Right.
And one more note before we close it up. Administration has asked us to provide this by the first week of November. So
Yes, hi. I'm just wanting to know if there's going to be a statement of, like, is there a copy to this document? I don't quite understand what Stuart's representing that we have to respond to, and I'd like to see a copy of that in writing.
yes, Margie, I have sent it during our last month's meeting and also as attachment to this month's.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just for the record, the document that I was describing is not mine. It was the county's approved legislative platform from last year.
So we're looking at that.
Okay, thank you.
Prepare for 20.
Excellent. Thank you, Stuart, very much.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, next item on the agenda is we are going to have a short brief about the Savion project proposal. And I would like to remind everyone that that this is an issue that everyone is clearly interested in, and we're really not going to have room to give as much space as we wanted to. So I would like to remind you again, there's going to be a special meeting Monday, November 6th, 6:30 to 8. At the end of the presentation, if we can aim for about 15 minutes, I'll see if I can make room for maybe 2 questions. And then we're going to have to move on to the remainder of our agenda. For those members of the public who find that they have questions that they really would like answered, or that they have questions that they really would like answered and they're not going to be able to make it to the special meeting, I will stick around at the end of the meeting and I'll be able to make notes or have a sheet where you can be reminded about the special meeting. So that way you can stay engaged in your voice-based learning. Okay, now that's it. If you would like to introduce yourself again and give us an overview of what you can.
Speak from here, try and speak loudly.
If you would like to come up,
Yes, take my chair.
you'll be able to be heard a little bit better. And
And people can see you.
Right. So, I assume everybody can hear me online? Yep, all right. So, my name is Ashton Martin. I'm the Senior Permitting and Environmental Manager for Savion. Savion Energy is based out of Kansas City. We were originally started as Straight Wind Energy, which was a wind power company started out of Lawrence. We work in approximately 33 states. We have a portfolio of approximately 34 gigawatts worth of solar energy and storage projects throughout the U.S. I personally am a Lawrence resident. Came up here in 2003 for undergrad. have an undergrad degree in environmental studies with a focus in prairie and wetland ecology. My graduate degree is in urban planning, also from KU, with a focus in sustainable land use planning. So that's a bit about me, that's a bit about the company, so a bit about the project. Sorry, trying to truncate this, maybe we'll have to put a little more time for questions. The Kansas Sky Solar Project, Energy Center is proposed north of town near Midland Junction. Our existing leasehold land control with participating landowners, building participants. There is no eminent domain involved with the project. Covers approximately 1,100 acres. The area that would be within sight of the fence, the way that the ordinance is written is a little bit confusing. So the site area is not the area inside the fence. The site area is the area covered by solar panels. So for sake of alignment, the site area is 604 acres. As part of all of our projects, we try to engage with the community early and often. It's something that they hammered home in my urban planning program, and something that we try and do with all of our projects. As part of that, Savion was commenter during the solar energy regulation development. We, as a company, provided feedback on the different drafts. They did everything that we wanted. We didn't write the ordinance. If we could, we would have asked for a 35-year CUP instead of a 25-year CUP, because that's how long the technology is warranted for. But this just beside the point. So the solar project, sorry, I'm trying to do this quickly. The solar project, the earliest construction date would be end of 2024, if approved by Douglas County for CUP and approved by the Kansas Corporation Commission, because the project is proposed to be owned and operated by Energy. Again, that's pending regulatory approval. In all likelihood, the earliest construction would probably be in 2025. Let's see. So circling back to community engagements, I went back personally and watched the few recordings that there were from ad hoc committee on the solar ordinance regs, read through the public comment through the various public meetings, and it was pretty obvious throughout that process that prime farming was a big concern from the community. As a local resident, and having a focus in sustainable land use planning like that was already abundantly clear to me. I also worked as a specialty crop producer in between undergrad and graduate school, so have the producer's perspective on the importance of high quality agricultural soil. So I think that Savion works across the U.S. I work across the central region of the U.S. from Iowa down to Louisiana, and I think that I can say with certainty that Douglas County has the most robust zoning ordinance that I've seen. Before Savion, I worked in Green Power North America. I worked in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, a little bit of Ohio, and even on the East Coast, I think that we still stand up. Douglas County is having a very robust ordinance, especially with how it incorporates and addresses the need to preserve farmland. So, with that said, it then brings up the question of, okay, if there is to be a project proposed on farmland or prime farmland, we go from solar panels with gravel beneath them to something that actually achieves what the ordinance is trying to achieve, which is preservation of prime farmland. And the way that Savion approaches it, we have a director of agrivoltaics within our company, and her sole job is to work on agrivoltaics. She's one of, I think, 3 in the country. So it's something that is important and demonstrated within our company. We try and work with each project and adapt it to have a unique solution that's appropriate for that area, for those soils, for that community. As part of our conditional use permit application, we submitted a vegetation and agrivoltaics management plan along with a grazing management plan. We diving quickly into those. The vegetation management plan identifies the establishment and maintenance of perennial vegetation. So focus on being on a diverse native grass for species mix that would provide pollinator habitat along with habitat value. Our conditional use permit also includes proposed wildlife corridors. As suggested by the ordinance, wildlife friendly fencing as suggested by the ordinance. The species mix was submitted to the Kansas Biological Survey for their review and recommendations on any potential changes, so that it is site specific and site appropriate. The species mix includes forbs that provide pollinator supply throughout various seasons throughout the years to ensure that you're not just front loading them on the first part of the season and then there's no food supply in the later part of the season. The point is like we really try to dig into the details and get it right and do it well. And then, so as agrivoltaics are defined in the ordinance, it is inclusive of pollinator plantings. I know that there is some debate about whether or not pollinator plantings actually constitute agrivoltaics, and that's, I think, something that we could all debate and discuss in a different forum. But as it is defined in the ordinance, that is part of it. On top of that, there's two other key parts. So there's the grazing management plan, which is another way of addressing vegetation management throughout the life of the project. So instead of mowing and weed eating, anywhere from 600 to 1,000 acres, you're utilizing sheep to do a lot of the work for you. And then there would still need to be some weed eating around the poles and around the fences and things of that nature. But you're trying to swap that out. So that's a win-win for everybody because the operator doesn't have as much of a maintenance cost, and you're providing an opportunity for a local producer to have grazing land and further building out a more robust food system. On top of that, having Evergy as a partner, as a potential operator, there's a unique opportunity here to implement research. So if anybody's familiar with agrivoltaics, there's Jack's Solar Garden out in the Front Range of Colorado, out in Longmont. I was actually out there a couple weeks ago after one of the workshops. And I think they have a good demonstration of what is possible at solar sites. So they've partnered with National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Arizona State University, and Colorado State University, researching all different types of agrivoltaic applications and what those benefits are, what works, what doesn't work, down to do tomatoes grow better on the drip edge or in the middle or on the outside, and quantitatively comparing the benefits.
You've got 6 minutes. Oh, wow, okay. Slow down. So one of the common questions we get is, well, where is this all going to be? And that is a difficult answer to reply because Evergy is not an agricultural producer, right? And there's an emerging market of sheep grazers that are working solar sites from New York down to Texas, but it's still a growing market. Like I said, we did work with a local sheep grazers to develop a grazing management plan, so it is designed to be appropriate for the area. But that's not to say that there's a guarantee that a local grazer could grow their flock to immediately graze 1,000 acres. And so I like to often think of the vegetation management approach as being like the baseline. So a lot of people are familiar with CRP land, the Conservation Reserve Program. This seed mix is, NRCS has CRP 38 to 42, it's a specific species mix, pollinator mix. So this is very much in line with that mix. And the intent is that as a baseline,
the project is planted in a seed mix that is gonna provide ecosystem services. So retention and, increasing retention in stormwater, increase in water infiltration, reduction in stormwater runoff, increase in pollinator supply, increase in carbon sequestration. That's the baseline. Then on top of that, as it makes sense and is practical for local producers, you can begin to feather in things such as sheep grazing and specialty crop production. So I'd be more than willing to yield some of my time to provide more opportunity for questions.
Okay, then let's go ahead and make room for, I'm gonna plan around 2 questions. We'll see how much time that gives us. Ashley, I'd like to start, if you have 1 question to start with, 1, because you won't be present for the special meeting, and 2, just because you're also the next agenda item. I thought if you're interested or prepared, do you have a single question to ask?
No, I'm taking notes and formulating one.
Sure.
Actually, if I could, one more thing.
Sure.
We do have a local Lawrence office. We're at 612 New Hampshire Street on the 2nd floor. I'm a local Lawrence resident. I'm there Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So if anybody would like to meet separately and just talk one-on-one, I'm happy to do that.
Is there an email address you would want to use if someone wanted to contact you or meet with you? I can put it in the chat if you're. Yep.
Sure.
Are we allowed that?
Yes, Matt, if you have a question, please go ahead. Thank you.
So you're saying this is gonna be owned and operated by Evergy, right? So you're building it and then they're gonna take it over.
We develop it,
Okay.
and then they build.
And what, how do you, is it in the language or how do we know Evergy is gonna do what you tell them?
That's a great question.
I mean, Evergy is also supposed to convert their coal plant out here and it hasn't been done, right? So what is it, are you, in your project, are you putting legal statutes on there that say you have to do these things?
I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but, you know, there's an ordinance in place and there are requirements. So taking decommissioning as an example, there's a requirement in ordinance that there has to be a decommissioning bond in place. So at the end of the project's life, there's a guaranteed amount of money to take all the steel out of the ground, all the panels off the site, so on and so forth. So that's a requirement in ordinance. Agrivoltaics are a little bit more of a gray area where it's tough to say, like, because, you know, you can't, it would be tough to say you have to graze 1,000 sheep on this site for 25 years. Or you have to grow tomatoes on this site for 25 years because things change, right? And so I guess I don't have a good answer of like how to guarantee that it will happen. I think the one thing that gives me assurance that it's going to be beneficial in the long term is that there's evidence to show that sheep grazing, as an example, is on par or cheaper sometimes than regular vegetation management. So there's an economic incentive.
I get that, but it's, you know, and, you know, projects are only as good as the people that are doing them out.
Yeah.
You know, so you can plan all day long, but what are we gonna hold their feet to the fire and say, this is what we're gonna do?
Yeah. When Savion designs these proposals, does Savion keep a record of non-compliance in the past of other projects that did not meet compliance when integrated and actually they said, okay, let's put pedal to the metal, and they realized, oh, this doesn't work in the real world.
So I mentioned our director of agrivoltaics. So she has partnered with Ohio, well, she's leading the project with Ohio State University. The project received a $1.6 million grant from the Department of Energy to research agrivoltaics. It started out where she was a row crop farmer, and she was just interested in seeing what would work, fit in her backyard, basically on her farm. And it grew over the course of a couple of years, and we're now, Savion is building a project in Ohio where that DOE grant is going to expand agrivoltaics on that site. So with that particular project, they're looking at alfalfa, so forest quality, seeding, things of that nature. And then with Evergy, so Evergy has committed to participating in the Monarch CCAA program. For those that are not familiar, Monarch CCAA program provides for, it works with, it's a public-private partnership to increase the amount of monarch habitat. They have committed to participating in that, and they have. We've got a site down in Baldwin, a site that's being constructed in Stoll, and two in Topeka, where they've done that all over the place.
Does the regulation offer any guidance on the monitoring of compliance, coming back to Cody's point? Or is the regulation silent on monitoring?
So there is monitoring, I believe, every 5 years to ensure compliance with the CUP and any conditions there.
Thank you.
Yeah, one quick question, I'm sorry, Smith. With the solar panels, are they the ones I've dealt with agriculture, they move, right? Are they fixed?
They're single axis tracking.
So they can change the shade for these different plants, like you said, growing potatoes.
Yeah.
They
So they'll track throughout the day, so they'll be oriented to the east in the morning, and they'll track in the road or north-south, and they'll track to them. So that's, yeah.
I'd like to make room for 2 questions from the public. Is there any other people in the public in the room? Could you raise your hand if you have a question immediately?
I'd like to know who your director of agrivoltaics is.
Sarah Moser, M-O-S-E-R.
M-O-S-E-R.
S-E-R.
And are you working with any local shepherds, shepherdesses, and?
You said that a local shepherd had helped decide what was appropriate. Is there someone on contract to take over that contract when and if and when the project moves forward?
So the project, or the grazing management plan was prepared by Jacqueline Smith. Most people know her she's got a couple things going. Cog Valley Meats.
Central Grazing.
Thank you.
How we've never done that. But yes, we are aware.
And Cog Valley Grazing Agrivoltaics is the LLC that prepared the grazing management plan.
What was that?
Cog Valley Grazing and Agrivoltaics.
Does the Kansas Biological Survey represent a local entity?
So we did meet with the Kansas Biological Survey. We did request their feedback on the sequences and took that on board.
I'm a shepherd and I have some concerns. I'm actually a North Lawrence shepherd, dealing with native grasses. So I have some concerns about that, but not tonight. One of my biggest concerns is I'm also a specialty crop producer. There's a lot of specialty crop production in the North Lawrence, Grant Township area. And so one of my concerns is what chemicals might be used. We already have a lot of trouble with 2,4-D type chemicals volatilizing. They can spread for wide areas and badly affect specialty crops. Will there be something in place in the plan that will say that these crop protection chemicals will not be used, that sustainable alternatives will be used, so that you're not affecting small producers in the area or large producers in the area?
Yeah, so the vegetation, we prepared a vegetation management plan. It does detail the preferred method of weed control. I think the benefit of having a native grass and forb mix is that you're gonna reduce the likelihood of having weed pressure. But I think even the county struggled with like prohibiting the use of chemical herbicides because there are noxious weed laws that you do have to abide by. In the vegetation management plan, the preference is for spot spraying, it wouldn't be broad aerial application. So while I can't say that it would be a guarantee that there would never be any potential drift, I don't think anybody could say that with certainty. Spot spraying greatly reduces that risk.
Now, spraying is not the only way to control noxious weeds. There's mechanical means, hand digging, there's grazing, targeted grazing.
Yeah, and
Lots of areas, and the important thing is to scout and keep ahead of it.
the grazing management plan does talk about using grazing as a way of managing weeds.
Yeah, and then the other thing, I guess one of my concerns about the grazing is that we are already struggling to source the hay that we need to winter sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me like part of the plan might be, is there a way to use this land to produce the hay that those additional sheep are gonna need? Because otherwise, what I'm afraid will happen is that we'll have a large increase in the sheep population in Douglas County without a counterbalancing increase in production of appropriate hay for sheep in winter. And the people that are gonna get squeezed out are the small producers like me. Unless I get to be one of the, I'm limited to 12 acres right now. So my flock is kept very small.
I think that's really good feedback, and that's kind of what we're hoping for in these type of conversations, to be able to tease out some of those things that I honestly hadn't thought about.
Yeah, we really need to look at how this could unbalance the whole access processing customers. Could really unbalance the current sheep production system in Douglas County.
Yeah, I think it's good feedback, and I think, we could probably brainstorm about how to address that.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got three things. One, Ms. Holly, that also reminds me, it would be worth it to see if the ordinances provide any exceptions to the sensitive crop registry. So it means like, okay, some such and such farms on the sensitive crop registry, like, oh, it's sensitive crop registry. Does that mean that, like, if they're doing spot spraying, do they get a pass because of the ordinance? Because it's saying actually we're privileging agrivoltaic, so that's something that we could do I could do a little follow-up for. Two, it's also worth pointing out that when we get to talk about prime soils, a wrinkle is that we already know that the significant portion of Douglas County is privately owned land. And so when it comes to new growers, young growers, small growers, the ability for them to get land is already incredibly difficult. And for agrivoltaics, that really limit how you can operate and what sorts of things you can grow, makes it a lot harder still for them to get into the market. If the farmer goes, well, I could sell a small plot of land to a small farmer, or I can lump into a larger sublease and get more return and still have farming in the sense that it's part of agrivoltaics. And so I think that's another consideration of what that means, who gets access to these soils. I'm really grateful for everyone. I think I'm really at the edge of time because I need to move on and let Ashley do her presentation. Ashton, will you have any time? Are you sticking or do you need to go? No, okay. Ashton, we really appreciate your time. It sounds like there might be a little time to ask Ashton questions at the end. Now, Ashley, I'm going to ask you to step on. Thank you for your patience. And we're going to get an update on Ashley's experience in the Caston Fellowship, which looks really cool.
Let me get oops, that's my comments. I don't. 1 second while I pull it up and I'll share my screen. I think so. Up on screen 1. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So my name's Ashley Hornberger. I'm a council member on the Food Policy Council, and I am a member of Kansas Farm Bureau and Douglas County Farm Bureau. I'm on the board of directors for Douglas County, and I got to do the Kansas Farm Bureau Caston Fellows program. Let me see if I can. There we go. It is a 2-year program. It's KFB offers a lot of leadership opportunities, and Caston Fellows is kind of their top tier one. Like, you have to have significant leadership experience prior to being accepted to this. So I'll go into a little bit more, but it's a 1-year program. So I think it's a 2-year. It's the second time they've done it, but it's a 1-year program. And it's pretty intensive, actually. There were 6 of us that were selected from across the state. The program outline is we met, we outlined our expectations. They did the trip reveal. There is a 2-week international ag experience study tour, and you don't know where you're going until you are accepted into the program. So at our orientation, they revealed the trip. We went to Uganda and Tanzania for 2 weeks. There was a lot of outside reading and homework. We did discussion boards. We had multiple Zoom meetings. We did a bunch of outside questionnaires and filled out not really questionnaires, but outside little mini programs we kind of did and came back and talked about it. We did a leadership summit weekend where they gave us some problems to go through, and then we kind of had to solve them based on what we'd learned so far. But there was the international experience, and then post trip, I'm required to give 3 presentations. So thank you for allowing me to present. We have to craft a Caston Fellows artifact, which could be anything they want it to be. I'm working on making mine my notebook, which I have extensive notes in and pictures and stuff. So I will bring, if I ever see you guys in person again, I'll bring it and you can flip through it. So it's something you can show your proof of the program kind of. We have exit interviews, and then our class puts on a workshop at Kansas Farm Bureau's annual meeting. So part of it going into it was you had to we set personal goals at that initial one. These are the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to become a better leader. And we talked about having a servant's heart. That was something that the 6 of us in our group kind of came together. I will say that most of our Zoom sessions were KFB staff directed it, but very loosely. They kind of give you an outline and then you take it on. So our group was different from the group before us, and I'm sure different from the group after us, just the things that we focused on and the way we talked about things. But so these were just some of mine. I wanted to be a better leader. I wanted to be more calm and confident. I'm kind of a hothead and jump off on tangents sometimes. And I wanted to be so calmer, more supportive and more affirming. Excuse me. So in December, I'm going to kind of break this down month by month because we did so much, and I want to make sure I touch on a little bit of everything. But we met in person, and we tried to do a little bit of team building because we only met in person twice before we spent 2 weeks traveling together, which is a different kind of stress. So we did that. The book we read was Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. I was not looking forward to it, and it was better than I thought. Some things we kind of came out of there is being clear is kind was something that we said a lot. If you are clear with your expectations, it's better than trying to be nice, say nice things to get around what you actually want. And then in the long run, people fail to meet your expectations because you weren't clear. So it's better to be clear. It's kinder. Perfectionism is defensive, and being a knower versus being a learner. You want to be a learner and be constantly growing, and it's okay to change your opinion and your perspective because that's how you grow and get better. And then hustling for worth versus knowing your value was something that we talked about and came back to a lot. And then in this book, she talks about rumbling with intention, and we joked about rumbling a lot. We mostly joked about it actually at my class. In January, we read a lot of books. The Extraordinary People, Everyday People, Extraordinary Leadership was a solid leadership book. If you've had any leadership training, I felt like you've probably already read this. The big thing that came out of this was to focus on relationship building, and it's basically people first. And then we during one of our Zoom sessions, because all of like for the, I'm sorry, bouncing around. Our Zoom sessions were generally, we had 2 a month. One was to talk about the reading and any outside homework, and the other was speakers of various kinds. So in January, we had Farm Bureau leaders from different states that came and talked. Some of their key takeaways was like the innovation leads to collaboration and to look for non-traditional friends, which in the ag industry is something we don't necessarily do a lot. So they really encouraged that. Be willing to fail. And then something that I underlined multiple times was to treat the consumer's opinion as a farm input, because that is something that as farmers, we definitely don't think about it. We don't think about it that way. And maybe it's something that we should. And then we read 10 Faces of Innovation as well, which is a really neat book. We only read 3 faces that you thought you identified with the most. And a lot of people, I went back and read a couple more just because it was interesting the way they do that. But the collaborator, the director, and the caregiver were the ones I picked. And like that was, I didn't go into a lot of detail on that because I don't talk about it later. But in February, we read Think Again and Leading Change. Our Zoom for this month got moved to a different month. So we really just did the books. Think Again was really, really good. It was my favorite book that we read. It talked a lot about how you think you know something and maybe you should go back and rethink it. Think again about how you're approaching a situation. If there's a different outcome you can come to. I joke that I think farmers do this all the time. Like, because every time you're like, I have this plan, and then something happens and you have to rethink how you're going to do it. And then something else happens, you have to rethink it. And then this piece of equipment breaks. And so I told my husband that he should read this one because I'm like, every farmer should read this. You guys do it anyway. Some things that came out of that was that task conflict can be beneficial. And I think a lot of times we back away from all conflict, like relationship conflict, not good, but task conflict is where you grow and you learn. They said to build a team of disagreeable people, which is super hard because nobody wants to be disagreed with over and over again. But that is where that kind of discussion leads to growth, leads to new ideas and innovation. The armchair quarterback versus imposter syndrome. A lot of times I feel the imposter syndrome, like that I don't maybe know as much as people think I do. And then admitting when you're wrong shows honesty. And these are very small snippets because we talked a lot about these. Something else that I underlined a lot was that a good debate is a dance that hasn't been choreographed yet. And I've noticed that I come back and think about that a lot when you're talking with someone. Because if you're debating well, that's how you should think about it. Otherwise you're just fighting, basically. Leading Change, we read parts of this, not the entire book, and it talked about the 8 stages change process. Something that they mentioned that we came back to a lot was building leaders instead of or addition to managers, because a lot of times people think leaders and managers are the same and they're not. They have different roles and they view things differently. So you should really have both going into an organization. And then we did the leadership practices inventory, which is just where you are as a leader, like where you're weak. And that kind of helped us move into the next part of the program. In March, we had our leadership summit and a couple of extra Zooms. So March was a very packed month. The first Zoom we did was on DEI, which was really interesting. And the speakers we had, hold on, let me pull up my March because I didn't write them on here. We had Teresa Reina Parks from KSU Career Center, Assistant Director and Liaison of the College of Health and Human Services. Moira Ozias from the University of Arizona, Educational Policy Studies and Practices, and Elliot Johnson from the National Veterinary Association, Director of Internal Communications. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And so they came and kind of, they had a list of questions, and then we were able to ask them questions. Like they had a list of questions and they discussed things, and then really kind of brought us in and asked questions about how we do this. This one was really interesting. So as you can see from our group, like there's only 5 of us in that picture, but there's 6 of us and 5 of us are white. And so when they're going into this conversation about diversity and equity and inclusion, like one of the things we asked was like, you know, a lot of times we feel like we can't say anything or we can't ask clarifying questions. And so this was really good for all of us to hear, especially like you figure, you know, white farmers from small towns in Kansas, like there's not necessarily a lot of diversity. Like I live in definitely the most diverse county of everyone, was basically how to approach that. And so this was really good. It was it's uncomfortable to hear maybe, you know, some of these things sometimes I think, and that's why we don't talk about them, but this was a really good Zoom we did. They talked about listening for understanding and not just to respond, which is just good advice anytime. And then to approach with kindness and grace from all angles, whether you're the marginalized person or not. And then to build stamina. So basically put yourself in uncomfortable positions over and over and over again until you get used to them and you figure out how to handle them, and then accept responsibility for your failings and apologize. That was a big one that they said. And I was like, these are definitely easy things that people don't think that they can do, and they can. And then that we see the world the way we are, not the way it is. And that's something that we talked about over and over again, especially when we went to Africa, because we noticed that we looked at it through our lens and we're like, this is really weird. And it's not, it's just, we were looking at the way we are, not the way it actually is. So part of the leadership summit is they basically gave us case studies, like they split us into two groups, and one group did the return of youth to a rural community, and the other group did growing a local food system. Oops, where'd I put my mouse? There. Sorry. So we also had before I get into the case studies, a Zoom leadership session. Oh, this was the one that was canceled in February with Dr. Mary Kay Seifers from KSU Global Food Systems Leadership Program Director, and Dr. Maureen Olenek, the coordinator of KSU Global Food Systems Initiative. Basically, one of them is on the research side of global food systems, and one of them is on the teaching side, because the global food systems is a secondary major at Kansas State University now. And so she was the director of that. So this was a really interesting Zoom, and it did not work out the way that the Kansas Farm Bureau staff initially set it up, because you could tell that Maureen, Dr. Olnick, is Mary Kay. Dr. Seifers is a teacher, because she wanted us to talk. So it was literally like a conversation the whole time, as opposed to just her telling us things. And it was a really, really neat Zoom call. I think we taped it, but it was neat. Like some of the things that she came out with is that food systems should be complex adaptive systems. So they're difficult to understand. They're constantly moving and changing. And they're systems. So we need to explore wholes, like rather than the parts. She said it requires quick goals and systems, and that an efficient system is an unfair system. And this is something that she said her ag econ majors brought to her and said all the time. And it's absolutely true. So that is why, to compensate, we've had a lot of smaller systems in the global food system. A little nudge is good because it can have a big effect later. She gave the example of a boat. If you just nudge it a little bit, it doesn't really do anything, but down the road, it's on a completely different path. And then she said, we need to make sure that we think of it as a global food system, because it's definitely more than you see. And then we talked about trade, because I've never been to a farming organization meeting where we didn't talk about trade. So it has to be equitable, and then understanding cultural implications around the world. Which is something that you see on a larger scale in a global food system. So, and then came to our case studies. We went back to so we split into two groups. It was very funny how they split us, because it ended up being the people who I don't think they intended to do it based on our personalities, but they kind of aligned us that way. So one group had their laptops and they made a PowerPoint presentation, and the other group, which is my group, we had paper and pen. And so you can see the Post-it notes here. That was our presentation. So we stood up and talked and took turns. Everybody had a couple Post-it notes. But my group, we got the one that was develop a local food system to give farmers more diversity and revenue options, and reconnect the community to the food they eat, making sure your farmers and community can thrive long-term. And so we ended up creating a farmers market that started as summers only and then grew, mostly because all three of us have some experience with farmers markets. So that was, they wanted us to pick a case study that none of us had experience in. And when they presented both of them, everybody had experience in both. So that's just kind of, they're like, well, we'll just kind of steer into the curve there. And then they put the three of us that go to farmers markets regularly on this one. But so this was really interesting. It was the second time we met in person. I think we got a lot out of this. It was an intense 36 to 48 hours, because we were working on this. There was a whole bunch of steps we had to do, but it was a really neat experience, that part of it. April, we got back into just Zooms. We talked about cultural intelligence, which was really neat. We did a CQ report, and I have mine if anybody would want to see it, but basically it talks about, it breaks down, asks you a bunch of questions about how you see things, and it tells you kind of where you fit into culture. And it's not just your race or your age or where you live or your orientation, sexual orientation. It was like cultures, all things that can be big or small. It's just a shared set of value, assumptions, beliefs, and behaviors. So this was really neat, especially going into an international study, because we talked about our culture, cultures we were part of, how we're all part of the same culture and yet all part of different cultures. And we said the word culture a lot, but that was really interesting. We talked about bias, which was an uncomfortable one as well, because bias is, you guys know what I'm talking about with bias. So we talked about bias can be good and bad. It's definitely created by the environment, and that you need to find someone you trust to point out your unconscious bias. Like we talked about superficial versus deeply ingrained biases. And then we watched some videos and some movies about this, and basically like came to the conclusion that people are shades of gray. No one's all good or all bad. And that's something that you need to keep in mind. We read parts of the Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias and did a worksheet with it. And it was really hard to put, like, for me, it was hard to put into words some of the things that I felt. I couldn't find a way to describe it. So that one was definitely one of the tougher ones. And then we kind of came back to, we noticed some themes between innovation and relational leadership as we went through ties to self-awareness, relationships, and just basically kind of making connections as the program started to kind of come all together. Basically, the best leaders are the ones that care about the people and not the position. And May and June was trip preparation. So we had the professor from Texas Southern University came and gave us an overview of the history of Tanzania, which was very dry. It was like sitting through a history class. It was interesting, and I took a lot of notes, but it was a different kind of Zoom than we'd had before. It was like a history class. But Tanzania is made up of over 120 tribes. They gained their independence from Britain in 1964, so very recently. And then they were trying to prep us for what it would be like when we were there. Shots, I got all of my vaccinations and medications for this trip. It ended up coming to like over $500, which was, I put that in there because it just kind of blew my mind, like as I was making notes on that. We also had Pastor David Walstead come, and he talked about the Uganda portion of our trip. He was kind of our point person here, and he set us up with everything that we did there. He's co-director and founder of Uganda Shoe Trees, which started as a church and then a school and then educational entrepreneurs. It's a 4-pronged program where they are basically connecting local entrepreneurs with people in the West to buy their products. And then after the farmers are paid, all of the additional profits go to buying shoes for children in Uganda so that they can go to school. Because that was one of the things, if you don't have the right kind of shoes, you don't go to school. And so that's kind of how they keep poor people poor. And so this was going through that. Even though he's a pastor, the actual Uganda Shoe Trees, one wing of it, like one prong, is a church, but the rest of it doesn't necessarily have a religious affiliation to it. Excuse me. I did want to talk a little bit about my trip. I still have time, right?
Yes. Let's see, we're at 8:21. I think, how much more of the presentation, how many more minutes would you estimate? Have you timed it?
No, this is a different one than I did because my other ones were for Farm Bureau, which had a different focus. I can just go through this really fast. This is mostly pictures, and I can touch on some of the neat stuff, but just so you guys can see it, because this was the coolest part. But so for our first part, we went to Uganda. We spent 2 full days there, and then we had travel days. You can see everywhere we went on the way. It was a long trip. Ended up being about just like over 21 hours to get there, not counting layovers. That's literally just time in the air. We did make it with all of our luggage, which was exciting. In Uganda, there's a video. I forgot if it played.
It is playing. If there was meant to be sound, I don't think we hear it.
You don't hear it? Okay. Anyway, well, that was the church service that we went to. So the first day in Uganda, we went to church in the mornings. We landed on Sunday. We landed Saturday night late, which this is part of the church that's part of the Uganda Shoe Trees program. And then that night we went to the Ndiri Cultural Center, and they had a barbecue, which is the food in the corner, and then traditional dance from the people of Uganda, like dance and songs from all the tribes in Uganda. So this was really neat. And then the next day we left Kampala, the city, and we went out into the country and kind of went to we toured the school, New Generation School, there it is. Met all these kids that are benefiting from it. They showed us the trees that they're planting because that was part of it. And then we toured some of their farms. I will say their farms in all of Africa are really interesting because they intercrop everything. Like there's a corn plant next to a coffee plant, next to a banana plant, corn plant, coffee tree, banana plant, and then pineapple sprinkled throughout and mango trees. It's because they do it all by hand, so they intercrop everything, which was interesting. So these are just some pictures. This one, we did sit down and have a meeting with farmers that are they're farmer entrepreneurs that are part of this. Was really frustrating because I think they thought we were going to have answers to all their questions, and we were not prepared for the questions they asked. We actually thought they were going to tell us what they do, and they were asking us for advice. And it's hard because we have different regulations in the way our governments work. So there's a lot of the things that we have that we're like, oh, well, we do this. They don't have that. There's no safety net for them. They don't have crop insurance. They don't have anything like that. So, so right, like this picture, you can see like banana plant, coffee tree, banana plant, coffee, like they just intercrop everything. So, and that's a pineapple plant next to a Robert. So, right. And then the next day we was a travel day, and we flew from Uganda to Kilimanjaro, Tanzania. This is their butcher shops. They were all over, and they were all open air like this. We're like, that's super not safe, but that's what they do on a daily basis. So it was cut that morning. It was butchered that morning. So it was a little bit different, but that's again, looking through it through our lens. We're like, that's not safe, but you know, then flying there was on like a tiny plane. We landed. I was really surprised to see fields of cotton. Like there was way more corn than I thought there'd be. Corn everywhere. Corn plots, seed shops. It was not what I was expecting. And then a lot of sunflowers too, because they use almost exclusively sunflower oil. So everybody grows their own sunflowers used for oil. This sunflower field looked terrible. They had been plagued by disease, and they said that all their crops are organic, not necessarily because they want it to be, but because they can't afford the chemical. And if they can't trust the concentration on it or how old it is. So nobody uses it really. This was the farm tours part of our trip to Tanzania, or in Tanzania. The first day we hadn't even made it to a farm, and our group asked if we could stop at a farmer's market that was there. Like you can see, these women were really great about talking to us and having us try everything. Our guide bought avocados and bananas and carrots and everything. It was all really, really good. This was inside one of their seed shops. This is a corn plot. Like I said, their produce is grown outside the city and they bring it in. And then giraffes crossed the road in front of us. That was really cool. So we toured a farm. Simba Farm is owned by a Dutch family, which is really kind of interesting how they do a lot of things there. A lot of their big commercial farms are owned by people that don't live in Tanzania and then just use local labor to produce that. Everything's done by hand. This guy, a huge farm. And then we toured Africado, where they have 1,000 acres of avocados, and excuse me, they ship mostly to the UK, and that's where their company is based out of, and then the EU. The farm tour part, like they grow barley. This beer was made from wheat and barley that they grow. This was interesting. So this field right here is a field of Mexican poppy. It's an invasive plant. They can't kill it. This is what it looks like up close. And they don't have anything that'll kill it. They just kind of till it under, and it just keeps coming back, and it's spreading all over, and it's like a horrible problem. So that was we talked about like invasive species and what those look like. The next day we did do a cultural group visit with the Mbora Women's Cultural Group. Basically, we spent like 3 hours cooking a meal the traditional way with like tiny clay pots on fire. They were extremely traditional. They did not let the men help. The boys just sat there in chairs on their own, and they pulled us in, and we did everything. I tried almost everything except for the pot that had intestines cut up in it, because I watched my friend cut them up. I'm like, don't think I can do intestines, but everything else I tried. It was all really good, actually. This one was interesting. Like I said, they had clear gender rules. Their culture is dying because their daughters, they're super proud. They're sending their daughters to university, but they are not coming back and continuing this. So we talked about how cool, like they can make money in their culture. So this one was super cool. You guys will like this. The Chanzi animal protein, we went to the next day. They are taking black soldier fly larvae, growing it, and then converting, like, so they convert food waste from their city use it to grow black soldier fly larvae, and then they dry the larva and they use it as a protein additive for animal feed and biofertilizer. So that was a really cool trip. It was kind of icky, not gonna lie, but and then we toured another coffee farm, but the maggot farm was super, super interesting. They made us go in the breeder house, which is that picture there, and it was awful. They don't bite, but it's still their giant flies. So the breeder house, and they like basically they take them. This is their pit where they get all the food waste, and they grind it into porridge, and they put it with a biochar in these grow houses and let it go. And then they harvest them here, and then dry, like toast them lightly, basically, and then dry them in the sun and package them for animal feed. It's like 40 to 46% protein, so it's a high protein additive. And then we toured the coffee farm where they do everything by hand. Like that is how they pick the husks off the beans. That's how, and then they roast them over a fire and they put it back. And that's how they grind the coffee. And it was like the best cup of coffee we had. So that was really neat. The coffee was really good anyway. We did do some village tours. We toured a Maasai village, and Mtawambu is a village with all these. So the Maasai village, they're like nomadic people, 100% protein diet. They do drink blood. That was something that they told. They're like, oh, you've heard that, like you do that, but it's not what you think. Like they take a little bit, put it in milk when somebody is sick. They're a warrior culture. And they still have that, but like our guide that was with us was born Maasai, and then he left to go to college, and he was not allowed to go back, but he was a connection we had there. So it was really, really interesting. We also went to Mtawambu, which is the only place, thought to be the only place in Tanzania where all 123 tribes are represented. They are doing like their couple different styles of painting. They're traditional. They carve wood, and like we saw these everywhere because they make it here and then they ship it out to all the malls in there. What I'm drinking here is the Chaga tribe makes a banana beer. So they make beer out of bananas. Weird. I tried it and it was okay, but I don't know if I would drink it, like order it out or anything, but I tried everything. Like the food was all really good everywhere we went. So the rest of the trip is pretty much animals. We went to the Ngorongoro crater.
The chat. Oh, I just wanted to make a little time to ask you questions because we're right at time and I would definitely send you more photos of Africa, but I want to ask you a couple questions before we convene.
What questions?
Excellent. So the first question I have is, what about this trip and this Castle Fellowship has changed about the work you want to do here? Like, has there been anything where you're like, oh, that's something? Because we're at a stage where like we're thinking about moving around our leadership and doing rotational leadership. So you've also been talking about leadership in addition to perspective. What is it you want to do?
So it's changed the way I think that I am as a leader, like the way I look at things, the way I approach situations, the words that I use, if that makes sense. I think it's like in the last year I've seen like talked about like from where we were at the beginning, and then like like this gal with red hair was in another leadership program I was in, and she's like was talking, and she's like, it's been so fun to watch you grow as a leader through these. And I was like, even this 1 year I feel like I've changed a bunch. The way we talk about like revitalizing our communities and ways that we can bring stuff back. I thought about, and maybe not necessarily for the Food Policy Council, but I've thought a lot about Douglas County and specifically Baldwin City, because that's like my tiny corner of Douglas County. So that has been something that I've thought about a lot, is the innovation that we can bring and things that we can try new things. Also, when we talked about collaborating and finding non-traditional partners, I like that a lot. And I think that's something that that most organizations don't do. And it's something that we could think about more.
What are the non-traditional partners that are you thinking of?
Well, it would depend on the situation. So I don't have any specifically in mind, but I was like, when we talk about like, oh, now I can't think of an example, but when we talk of like when we have a situation, like we always go to the same people. I feel like I know like in like Farm Bureau, we've talked about it. We do that a lot. Like we go to the same people every time, and instead maybe we should think about broadening it to like we've talked about like on our board about going into non-ag partners for things. So it would just depend on the situation. like what we're working on, who we would go to.
Cool. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, then I do have one more question and then we'll get ready to move on. The last question is, what ways do you think we can make room for more conflict in the Food Policy Council?
For more conflict?
In the sense that, like you said, it's easy for people
task
to
conflict?
Yeah, or maybe we all want to vote the same way, so we say, well, maybe I don't agree with this, but I don't want to make room for it because I don't want to be the squeaky wheel.
So I think that that's not something that the council can do so much as council members can do, if that makes sense. And that kind of goes back to like the DEI conversations that we had about like sometimes like we're afraid that we're going to come off poorly or that people are going to think that we're mean and we just have we have questions that we don't want to ask or we're afraid if we ask the same way. So I think a lot of that is going to be like if we come into a situation like with Grace, which the Food Policy Council, I will say I think is pretty good at this. Coming into a situation like with Grace and acceptance and saying like, like I asked this question and it sounded offensive and I didn't mean it that way. I just want to know this. I could have phrased it better. But I think I think a lot of times we don't create conflict because we are afraid of that part of it. So as council members, if we create a culture where we're open and affirming and like, if you mess up, it's okay. Like, we didn't call it a safe space, but like, it's like making it acceptable to be vulnerable with each other, like rumbling with vulnerability. That's the Brené Brown thing that we talked about, but was, making it okay to make mistakes in front of each other, like, and that you're not a terrible person if you say this wrong. Like, this is just how we should do it this way instead. Because I know that was something that I was like, that was a question I specifically asked. I'm like, I'm afraid that like I phrase something and I don't mean it bad, but it sounds bad. And so like a lot of times if I'm not sure how to phrase it right, I don't say anything at all. And so maybe we should just push through that. So that's not necessarily something the council can do other than the creating the culture for it and the expectation that you're going to mess up and it's okay.
Cool. I fully embrace that. It's something that comes up in the Johns Hopkins group, and you will probably see more of that sort of embracing. Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm sorry we didn't get through all of it.
Well, and I didn't think we would. I was like, I put the other stuff in at the beginning because that was the important stuff. So
if you can, please, if you can share the PowerPoint or the slide deck with the council, I'm definitely going to look at it.
Yeah.
So this is a Canva presentation. I can send it out to everybody if you guys want to see it. It's got all my notes on it and everything. So
thank you.
Okay. Again, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, everyone who attended tonight. I'm going to convene. Gosh darn it. We're going to adjourn. We have convened. It's time to adjourn. I would like to remind everyone again that we're going to try and set up a special meeting for Monday, November 6th, 6:30 to 8, so we can vote on the things that we needed to vote on.
Sustainability Office, 106 New Hampshire Street, Thornton, and also on Zoom. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, members in the chat. Please go on with your evening if you like to. We are, and then Ashley is here. Thank you.
No, I gotta go.
Oh, didn't go?
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, you got me. Oh, man, oof, I got faked out. Oof.
Can you give you a shout out, Tony?
Sure.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.